The revolving door spun once, then stilled, as if the building itself were holding its breath. A man stood on the marble floor of a hotel lobby just past midnight, a sleeping child resting against his shoulder. Her small fingers curled around a worn stuffed bear. He had asked for nothing more than a room. One night, 2 guests. Nothing special. And yet the young man behind the front desk was already reaching for the phone, his eyes cold, his judgment made before a single word had been exchanged. No one in that gleaming lobby knew his name. No one recognized the quiet, unshakable stillness in his eyes, the stillness of a man who had already survived the worst thing life could do to him and had rebuilt himself from the wreckage of it. They saw only the gray hoodie. They saw only the tired denim, the plain sneakers, the absence of anything that announced wealth. They saw a black man standing where their minds had already decided he did not belong. "Sir," the clerk said, his voice pitched just loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "this isn't the kind of place you can just walk into." The words dropped into the lobby like a stone into still water, spreading outward, touching every witness who pretended not to notice. What none of them understood, what not one soul in that room of marble and money could have imagined, was that the man they were about to humiliate had built the very floor beneath their feet with his own hands, his own sacrifice, his own blood. Before the night was over, one career would end in disgrace, another would be quietly reborn, and a little girl's simple question would bring an entire empire of arrogance crashing down. What happened over the next few hours would change both of their lives forever. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances can change the world, please take a moment to like this video. Comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to the Aura Fables for more unforgettable stories. 3 months earlier, in a modest brick house on the quieter edges of Chicago, Marcus Johnson sat alone at his kitchen table long after his daughter had drifted to sleep. A single lamp burned above a folder of numbers. Only a handful of people on this earth were trusted to see. To the world outside that window, Marcus was invisible in the particular way that quiet, hard-working men so often are. He wore plain clothes, he drove a car nobody looked at twice, picked his daughter Zoe up from school every afternoon at exactly 3:15, waved to the same crossing guard, and never once mentioned that his name was etched into the deeds of 17 hotels scattered across the country, or that his signature alone could move more money in an afternoon than most people saw in a lifetime. It had not always been this way, and the road here had cost him more than any ledger could measure. 10 years earlier, Marcus had been an engineer, the kind whose mind companies quietly fought over, offered signing bonuses for, begged to stay. He had built a life with his wife Alina, a life stitched together from small, ordinary joys. Sunday mornings, inside jokes, the particular sound of her laugh from another room. Then illness arrived without warning or mercy, and in the space of 8 months it took her from him entirely, leaving Marcus alone with a 2-year-old daughter and a grief so total it nearly buried him where he stood. He did not rebuild slowly, rebuilt with a fury born of necessity, because a toddler needed a father who could still stand upright. Every hour he was not holding Zoe, rocking her through fevers or bedtime fears, he poured into work, first small, careful investments. Then a single failing hotel in Charlotte, bought for almost nothing because no one else believed it was worth saving. He restored it not with marble and gold leaf, but with a single stubborn philosophy passed down to him like an inheritance, that every person who walked through a door deserved dignity before they had proven a single thing to anyone. That idea, quiet and defiant, became Johnson Hospitality Group. 11 years later, it had grown into 17 properties, anchored by its crown jewel, the Grand Meridian, standing tall and proud on Fifth Avenue. The flagship Marcus had personally opened, personally designed, and personally promised would represent everything he believed a place could be. Marcus rarely visited his own properties as their owner. He visited them as a stranger, dressed down, unannounced, carrying nothing that hinted at what he was worth. He would walk through his own lobbies and simply watch. Watch how his staff treated the people who arrived with nothing to offer but a quiet request for a room and a place to rest. It was the only honest way to see a building once its owner had stopped watching. His own father had done a version of this kind of watching, only from the other side of the counter, spending 22 years working hotel security on long, aching night shifts in a place not unlike this one. He would come home in the gray hours before dawn and sit at the kitchen table without speaking for a long while, and something he told Marcus once had never left him, that the way a place treats the people it believes don't matter tells you everything you will ever need to know about its true character. Tonight, after 3 exhausting months away overseas, closing a deal that would secure hundreds of jobs. Marcus's flight had landed late, delayed by weather and circumstance, until well past 11. Zoe had fallen asleep somewhere over the Atlantic and had not fully woken since, her small arms wrapped tightly around Captain, her stuffed bear, her father's shoulder serving as the only pillow she needed. Rather than risk the long, exhausted drive home, Marcus made the only sensible decision available to a tired father holding a sleeping child. They would stay at the Grand Meridian for the night. He had not called ahead. He never did. Some habits once formed by necessity simply never leave a man. The clerk's name was Derek Young, meticulously groomed, and entirely convinced that his snap judgments of people were a professional skill rather than a quiet, corrosive prejudice. When Marcus approached the desk in his gray hoodie, a sleeping child against his shoulder, Derek's eyes swept over him with the swift, dismissive calculation of a man who believed he could measure a person's worth in under 3 seconds. "We're fully booked tonight," Derek said smoothly, his voice pleasant. His eyes never quite meeting Marcus's, even as his screen displayed a lobby of empty waiting rooms. Marcus asked once more, gently, patiently, for anything at all. Not a suite, just a single room, somewhere quiet where his daughter could finally sleep in a real bed. He received the same rehearsed refusal, delivered with the practiced ease of a man who had said it many times before and expected to say it many times again. Barely 3 minutes later, the revolving door spun again, and a well-dressed couple walked in without a single reservation between them. Derek's entire posture transformed instantly. His shoulders lifted. His smile arrived wide and genuine. His voice turned warm as spring water. Within 4 minutes, he had processed a card, printed 2 key cards, and sent the couple off with cheerful instructions about breakfast hours. Marcus watched every second of it in complete, deliberate silence, cataloging the injustice the way his father might have once done, from behind a very different counter. When Marcus finally asked to speak with a manager, Richard arrived already carrying the full weight of a conclusion he had drawn before he'd even crossed the lobby floor. He positioned himself beside Derek, forming a quiet wall of authority against a man he had already decided did not deserve an explanation. "Our staff exercise their professional judgment," Richard said, flat and immovable. "I stand behind that completely." When Marcus refused to simply vanish into the night without so much as his name being taken down, Richard's patience snapped entirely, and he gave a short, sharp nod to waiting security guards. They positioned themselves on either side of Marcus's chair with the practiced, heavy ease of men who had performed this exact maneuver many times before. It was in that precise moment that Zoe woke, not gradually, the way children rarely do, but all at once. Blinking into the light and taking in the guards, the tension, the coldness radiating through the room in a single, unhurried sweep. She sat up straighter, clutching Captain to her chest, and looked directly at Richard with the frank, unguarded curiosity of a child who had not yet learned to pretend she didn't see exactly what she saw. "Why are you making us leave?" she asked, her small voice clear and unhurried, carrying farther across that marble lobby than she likely intended. When Richard offered no answer, she pressed further, working through the problem with the methodical seriousness of an 8-year-old determined to understand a broken world. "If they don't want us here, why do they even work here? Isn't their whole job supposed to be helping people?" No one answered her, because everyone standing in that lobby, the guests at the bar, the guard shifting uncomfortably on his feet. Even Derek, with both hands flat against the counter, already understood the ugly, undeniable truth of what was happening, and were only now being forced to face it in the plain, unblinking language of an 8-year-old. Richard, unmoved even by the piercing honesty of a child, ordered the guards to escort the pair out immediately. Marcus rose slowly, careful of Zoe's weight against him, and did not move toward the door. Instead, with unhurried calm, he reached into his pocket, found a number, pressed call, and brought the phone to his ear. He spoke for short sentences. He listened for perhaps 10 seconds. Then he ended the call, returned the phone to his pocket, and simply waited, one steady hand resting on his daughter's shoulder. The elevator chimed softly, an ordinary sound the lobby produced dozens of times a night without notice. but every person in that room noticed this one. The doors slid open, and Thomas Webb stepped out, silver-haired, dressed in a suit hastily thrown on, and not quite straightened. Flanked by two members of the executive team moving with the barely restrained urgency of men who understood precisely the size of the mistake unfolding beneath them. Thomas crossed the lobby floor directly, walking past Richard without so much as a glance, past Derek without breaking stride, and stopped in front of Marcus with a formality that carried genuine, trembling weight. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "I am so sorry you were kept waiting." The lobby fell into a silence so complete that even the faint jazz drifting from the bar suddenly seemed grotesquely out of place. Thomas turned to face the front desk, his voice even, which somehow made the moment land harder than any shout could have. "This is Marcus Johnson," he said, letting each word settle into the marble around them. "He's the founder and sole owner of Johnson Hospitality Group. He owns this hotel. He owns the chairs you are standing beside, the uniforms you are wearing, and the contracts that determine whether any of you have a job tomorrow morning." He let that single sentence hang in the air for exactly one long, unbearable breath. "I want everyone in this room to be entirely clear about what happened here tonight." Derek turned the color of the marble counter beneath his hands. Richard stood frozen in the center of the lobby, his certainty collapsing in real time, his mind visibly scrambling to reconstruct a version of events he could survive. The security guards stepped back without being told, instinctively putting distance between themselves and a situation that had just fundamentally, irreversibly changed shape. Several phones that had quietly been recording lowered on their own, as though the moment demanded something more sacred than mere footage. Marcus looked down at his daughter, whose wide eyes moved from Thomas to her father and back again. "Daddy," she whispered, "you know this man?" Marcus knelt slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, baby," he said softly, "I know this man." Around them one guest rose from a lounge chair, then another. And then the entire lobby seemed to rise together, not out of mockery, but in quiet, spontaneous recognition of a man who had endured public humiliation with unbroken dignity, and a small girl whose fearless question had cracked the whole rotten structure wide open. Applause spread through the marble hall, soft at first, then full and unrestrained. Tears welled in Zoe's eyes as she watched her father, for what felt like the first time in her young memory, finally being seen by a room full of strangers, exactly for who he truly was. Marcus did not smile in triumph. He simply turned, walked to Richard, and said in a voice too quiet for theater and too heavy to argue with, "You didn't just fail a customer tonight. You failed everyone who has ever walked through a door like this one and been made to feel they didn't belong. And you did it in front of my daughter. You're terminated, effective immediately." Richard opened his mouth once, found nothing worth saying, and walked toward the back office in silence. Derek, unlike Richard, was given a rare and deliberate second chance. Marcus stood before him at the counter and spoke plainly, without cruelty. "You made a choice tonight based on how someone looked. I need you to sit with that, not with what it might cost you, but with what it actually felt like to be on the other side of it." He enrolled Derek in a full values-based retraining program, not a punishment but an education, and told him the door would remain open if he still wanted to walk back through it a changed man. Maya, the young concierge who had stood frozen through the entire ordeal, unable to intervene inside a system stacked against her, was pulled aside next. "You saw it," Marcus told her gently. "You knew something was wrong, and I understand exactly why the structure here made it impossible to say so. That's a failure of leadership, not of your character. Starting tomorrow, you're moving into a supervisory role in guest services, because I need people in positions where they can finally act on what they already know is right." 3 months later, the Grand Meridian's lobby looked much the same as it always had, the warm light falling across Italian marble, the distant, unhurried sound of jazz drifting from the bar. But when a travel-worn family came through the revolving doors, tired parents trailing to children and an oversized backpack dragged with stubborn pride, no one measured their worth by their luggage or their shoes. Maya crossed the floor to greet them by name before they'd even reached the desk, and within minutes, tired shoulders eased, and the boy with the backpack finally, willingly, let someone carry it for him. In the far corner, Marcus stood watching, Zoe beside him, her hand in his, Captain tucked snugly under her free arm. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" she asked, watching Maya laugh gently with the children. Marcus smiled, warm and unhurried, The way a man smiles when he has finally watched something broken become whole again. "Yeah, baby," he said. "That's exactly what it's supposed to look like." True greatness, in the end, is never measured by a title, a bank balance, or the clothes a person happens to be wearing when they walk through a door. It is measured by character, by what a person chooses to do in the quiet moments when no one expects to be watching, and by the courage to make certain no one else ever has to endure what you once did. Every person carries invisible battles beneath a calm and ordinary surface. And sometimes the man standing quietly in a worn gray hoodie is the very one holding the whole world together.